to Professional Book Girl. My name is Kayla and I read a ton of books so that I can recommend the best to you, and that is what we will be doing here today. I am just going to start off right away with some announcements. Quick follow-up from last week's episode. I know everyone was probably on the edge of their seats wondering if I got to squeeze in one more read before I went to my family's New Year's Eve party, and I am happy to report that I did. I finished I almost said across. I finished A Court of Frost and Starlight. That is the title of the ACOTAR novella right before I left to go to my family's New Year's Eve party. And then I brought, you guys don't know this, but I brought PBG with me to the New Year's Eve party. And I sat and uploaded it and did all the show notes and everything while I was hanging out with my family, which was just a fun evening. The last two New Year's Eves I've just spent at my aunt and uncle's house, and it's been so much fun both times. Last year was like more of a party atmosphere, but this year it was just my like aunts, uncles, and cousins, and then my one cousin had a bunch of her friends over. But it's just so nice to like be chill on New Year's. I'm not a huge New Year's Eve girl. But we made it through. And you know what? When I was at my aunts and uncles, I had an epiphany all of a sudden, and I looked at my mom and I was like, oh my God, this is the first year of my life that I can remember that I'm not sad on New Year's Eve. Like I talked about this on the Christmas episode, but the holiday season just gets so melancholy. And I always feel that specifically on New Year's Eve. It's something about the passage of time that freaks me out. I have no qualms with getting older. I'm turning 30 this year, and I keep saying, I've been saying for the last few years, I can't wait for my 30s. I feel like I'm going to love them. Older people I know have always been telling me I'm going to love my 30s, but I'm excited to be 30 and be turning 30. It's not until July. Like, we've got 7 months to go, and the end of July at that, although I already am planning my 30th birthday party. I am so excited for it. But it's different from my birthday when it comes to feeling melancholy about the passage of time. It's just something about New Year's that just gets me like sad a little bit. But this year I didn't feel that. I think it's because so much of my year was spent sad, and I'm like thankfully in such a better place. And I was in a room with my family. You guys know how much I love spending time with my family. So it was a lovely evening. But all of that to say, I just wanted to let you guys know that I did finish my 252nd book of 2023. So I ended 2023 at 252 books. Wild. And then I also, another follow-up. So I said on last week's episode when I was talking about reading goals that I wasn't going to set a numerical number in Goodreads, but if you follow me on Instagram at KRedWhat, you know that on New Year's Day, I kind of just said fuck it, and I did go ahead and put 202 books in Goodreads. Even when I was talking about it on that episode, I'm pretty sure I said that I have a number in mind that I want to hit, and I feel like the last few years, I've put what I thought was a realistic number in, but I always had a stretch goal in mind that I just wouldn't put in Goodreads. But I was like, do you know what? I know in my head I'm aiming for 202. So I went ahead and put that in Goodreads. And the logic behind 202 is that in 2022, I read 2021 I read 200 books. 2021 I read 201 books. But then 2023 was 252 books. So for 2024, 202 is 50 less than 2023. Because I really don't think I'll be able to read like that again, because I'm hoping I will be in a better mental space and not do what I did in September and October of last year and literally read a book a day for the whole month. But it's also one more than where I ended off 201. So we'll see how that goes. So that's all the follow-ups from last week's episode. On to announcements. I announced my book club last week, and I was blown away by your guys' reaction. I don't know why I thought people wouldn't be excited about it, because it is such an exciting thing. I know other bookstagrammers have book clubs. I've always thought about doing it, but it didn't feel right. I'm not a buddy read girl. I don't like talking about books in like a group chat or something, like where do people even do it like this on Bookstagram anymore? But like back in the day, it would be like buddy reads on Bookstagram, and you would like be put in a group chat, and then everyone would talk about the books on a certain date. And I was just never into that. Like it just wasn't for me. Honestly, fun fact you guys don't know about me, I hate typing on my phone. Like I hate texting because I just don't like to move my thumbs that much. So like when I like write out my book reviews, that's why I kind of hate writing reviews, because I hate having to like type that much on my phone. Like having to like talk about a book in depth like that in a group chat just sounds like torture to me. But now that I have my own podcast, I'm so excited that it seemed perfect, you know, like Taylor Swift Mastermind, all the stars aligned, and it just makes sense for me to have a podcast in this format. I'm so excited that you guys are excited about it. I'm so excited. So many of you have said you've already read the book. By the way, the January pick is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. So many of you have said you've read it and loved it and can't wait to hear my thoughts on it. So many of you also were like, I've also been meaning to read this and now this is my excuse. So it just confirmed the hypotheses that I had that this was the correct pick for the inaugural Professional Book Girl / K-Read What is a part of everything with Professional Book Girl, but I am making this a K-Read What / Professional Book Girl, just basically Kayla book club. So I cannot wait for that. I haven't started to read it yet. I'm still, if you're watching on video, you can see I'm currently at my mom's house today. The day of recording is January 5th, which is my mom's birthday. So I decided I would stay home for her birthday, but her birthday's on a Friday, and we'll be celebrating with my family and my siblings all weekend. So I'm still in the city. And the book, all that to say, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is in the city at my apartment. So I'll be reading that next week when I'm in my apartment. I'm not going to share thoughts. I think I want to save it all for the episode. So the episode will be out on February 1st. And for those of you who may be looking at a calendar right now, that is not a Monday, because I said when I announced the book club, I was debating having it be a Monday episode or a separate bonus episode. And I decided that the book club episodes will be a second episode in that week. So there will be designated book club episodes on the last Thursday of the month. And I know I just said it's February 1st, but I want to give everyone time to read it. The calendar just did not map out the way that I wanted it to this month. So on February 1st, which is a Thursday, you will get the book club episode where I will be talking about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow with spoilers, everything. Nothing is off the table. And I want you guys to be a part of that episode. So send a voice memo or take a video, and the video won't be in the episode. I'll just pull the audio from it, sharing all of your thoughts on the book, the good, the bad, the ugly. I want to know everything, spill the tea, Hollywood dream casting, everything you thought about it when you first read it, just all the details we want to know. And I will include that in the book club episode. So you'll be hearing from me and from other Professional Book Girl listeners. And if you're debating doing it and thinking maybe you won't, please do it, because that is the part of the book club I'm most excited for. And since I came up with that idea, I've been worried people wouldn't send their voice memos in. So be prepared. It might just be me. And I don't blame you, because I'm kind of asking you guys to do homework. I just think it would be really fun to be able to include other people's opinions and thoughts about the book in the book club episode. But I'm not begging, but please send the voice memo to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com by January 25th so that I have time to edit it into the episode. And yeah, that episode will be out on February 1st. So last quick little few announcements. I have a bookshop.org where I get a little bit of money if you buy a book from it, including the book club books. So head to bookshop.org/shop/professionalbookgirl if you want to help a girl out. Please make sure you're following, subscribe, whatever you have to do on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Leave me a nice little rating and review. There are a few reviews on Apple Podcasts, and when I saw them, I was freaking out. It made me very happy. And make sure you're following me on Instagram at K-Read What. Follow the show on Instagram at Professional Book Girl. That is it for announcements. It's time to talk about what I'm obsessed with this week. Okay, so this week I'm obsessed with a few TV shows. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I know I did my Bravo spiel about Roni, but I basically, starting on Christmas Eve, I started feeling a little bit under the weather. I ended up just having a cold for a few days. Thankfully, it didn't develop into a bad cold, but on Christmas Eve and Christmas and the 3 days after that, I just didn't really feel great. So in the middle of my ACOTAR reread, I was also watching some shows. So if you follow me on social media, you know that I was obsessed with The Sopranos for all of the fall. I have not watched a long show like that in so long. And here's my thing with TV. And part of why I started that show was because I don't have a full-time job. So all of a sudden in August, I was unemployed, and I was like, oh, I actually have time to watch these shows that everyone talks about. Because for me, when I watch TV, it is Bravo. I feel like you guys know that, but my sister specifically always says to me, you consume so much media, about me. But I do it in such a manageable way. I usually have a show I'm rewatching that will be on in the background if I'm getting ready, doing my hair, when I'm working. And then at night, I'm just sitting down and the only hours of TV I'm watching at night are my Bravo shows. Now, sometimes that's just like 2 days a week, 1 hour. Other times it's like what I had this fall where I had 6 shows on Bravo, and for 2 nights of the week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I was sitting down watching TV for 3 hours. But that's just the life that I signed up for when I started watching Real Housewives of New York as a 7th grader. I just have no choice but to continue doing that. So I always am watching my Bravo shows, but there are like scripted series and things that I love. I don't watch them when they're on, really, because I like to like wait and binge. And I usually watch everything that's hyped up later because I need to hear about it like 1 million times before I'm convinced to watch a show, because I just don't, if something is going to pull me away from reading, like specifically when I was working, then it needs to be worth it. It can't be something that I'm not like super into. But since I have been unemployed, I have been watching more shows. So the first one I did over the summer when I first left my job was The Summer I Turned Pretty. I finally watched that. Then I watched Medici. I always was meaning to watch that, and I loved it. And then because I had my Reputation era in August, and I just like left my life in the city and came here where I am now to my mom's. And I was here for 6 weeks, and I just went to the beach every single day. And it was like miserable and magical at the same time. Taylor really was like defining my whole life with that lyric in 22. But when I got back to the city, I always have I never even seriously thought about watching The Sopranos. It was always a show that my whole family was obsessed with when I was younger. I remember being at my grandparents' house on Sundays for dinner, and then everyone being like, we got to get home for The Sopranos. And my grandparents wanted us out of the house because they wanted to watch The Sopranos. And then I feel like maybe it was during the height of the pandemic when we were in lockdown, people my age were starting to talk about it. And then so I was kind of just had in the back of my head. And then one day in September, I was like, I'm just going to start The Sopranos. And as you guys know, fucking obsessed. It is such a good show. The ending was brilliant. I will never be okay. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with Tony Soprano. It was just so good. And it was also really fun because pretty much every member of my family, not my siblings and my cousins, but my parents, my aunts and uncles, they all loved the show too. So I've been bonding with them over it. Now my uncle will send me Sopranos memes and Sopranos video clips, and we're just bonding over that, which I think is really fun. So if you're looking for a new long show, I highly recommend The Sopranos. But once I finished that mid-December, I started catching up on the limited series that I enjoy that came back in the meantime when I was watching The Sopranos, because I was just fully dedicated to that show. So I watched the final season of The Crown. Mixed thoughts. I don't really want to get into talking about it, but the ending gave me chills, so whatever. The Gilded Age, oh my god, I'm obsessed with the show. I was with the first season too. I just love it so much, and which doesn't surprise me because Downton Abbey is one of my favorite shows. But I love the New York of it all, and it makes me look around the city differently when I'm walking around. I've spoken about this on the internet in the past, but the Gilded Age used to really stress me out. And as a historical fiction girly, as a history girly, there's eras that you just get so drawn to, and then there's eras that I just shy away from. For example, I hate the Oregon Trail. No offense to anyone who traveled on the Oregon Trail, but me getting Kirsten from American Girl, never. I have anxiety thinking about playing the Oregon Trail game in elementary school. I remember when we first learned about the Oregon Trail, and I was absolutely not. It stressed me out so much to the point where I'm convinced that in a past life, I died on the Oregon Trail. I just could not survive in a covered wagon with all my belongings trekking across America like that. That is so not it for me. And another one that used to really stress me out was the Gilded Age. For some reason, just I didn't enjoy really learning about it. I know, in school, learning about the robber barons and shit, there was this one moment in college where I think I was in a history class, but I had a teacher who he was just really an asshole, and he looked like the Jonas Brothers' dad. But unrelated, I've never met the Jonas Brothers' dad, so allegedly, I don't know if he's an asshole or not, but this teacher looked like him, and he was just such an asshole to my class. And he was saying something about Carnegie, I'm pretty sure it was, and he couldn't remember how he made his fortune. And I didn't even raise my hand. I was just steal, duh. And I was I know my robber barons, living in New York, you those names are just so prominent that it's hard to not think about them. When I went to see The Tree I saw The Tree four or five times this Christmas season, and it's in Rockefeller Center. Like, you can't escape those names, Astor, all of those. So I love the Gilded Age. Now I love learning about it because it's like the history of New York, the city where I live and love. And also I have fallen in love with Alva Vanderbilt. She is a historical figure that I am so interested in. There's a really great historical, really more of a biographical fiction novel called A Well-Behaved Woman by Teresa Ann Fowler that is all about Alva. It is very long. If that seems intimidating to you, The Social Graces by Renee Rosen covers her and Caroline Astor and is a bit more casual about that. But I mentioned Alva because you may be saying she's not a character on the show, but she is. The Russells are very much meant to be the Vanderbilts. Everything that Mrs. Russell, I forgot her name, Bernadette, I don't know. In my head, it's Alva, because every single thing that she does is what Alva did. My gosh, I can't speak today. Alva started the Met Opera. She was trying to get Caroline Astor to join her. The end of season 2, if you know what Alva Vanderbilt did, is so obvious. And I was like freaking out because I'm just going to say it because it's history. So Alva Vanderbilt basically forced her daughter Consuelo to marry an English duke who was the Duke of Marlborough. Someone British is listening to that and hearing me butcher it. And his family seat is Blenheim Palace, where I went on my UK trip. Here we go again, 7 episodes strong mentioning that UK trip. But basically the Blenheim Palace was like going to fall apart, and which is such like and unimaginable to think now, because when you go there, it's now like a world historic like preservation site. When I was there, they were doing some restoration work on it, but it is just like insane. It is so beautiful, so stunning, so full of history. The grounds are beautiful. The gardens are like so magical. But Vanderbilt money, aka American money, is what saved Blenheim Palace. And when I went on the tour through there, like there's photos and like a bust of, not photos, paintings of Consuelo Vanderbilt, which was just like cool to see as like American abroad, that like a part of our history played a role in saving like a huge part of that history. But yeah, so beyond that though, like beyond that plot line, I've just been loving, it's really bothering me, Bertha. Her name's Bertha, I'm pretty sure. It's like, what the heck is that woman's name? But I loved the whole season. Nothing that I didn't love. Just so good. I flew through it. I really enjoyed it. And then when I finished that, I watched the latest season of The Morning Show, which, like, guys, I'm not as into it as I was. I feel like season 1 was really like their season. By the end of it, they pulled me back in because everything started making sense, but it became a show that like I watched the last 5 episodes while I was getting work done the other day. Like I wasn't like even fully paying attention to it. I kind of was just like, whatever. It became a background show for me. I'm still watching Roni Legacy, still loving it. I stand by what I said. Give me a yearly Roni Girls trip and I will be happy with that. And then, oh my God, last week on Bravo, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City finale. We have not seen a Housewives finale of that caliber since Real Housewives of New Jersey season 1 when Teresa flipped the table. And I stand by that. Like there has not been a finale that insane since. I think that's the last time we fully saw a cast come against one person that strongly. It was amazing. And I was just going to say I think, but it's not even I think. I know that it was so good because they weren't leaking it on social media before. Like they talked about this on Housewives of Beverly Hills last season, how like all of a sudden everything was leaked in the press, and Lisa Ren is gone, and look at that, not everything's leaked anymore. There is something for hearing. I like hearing rumblings when a season is filming that like something crazy is going down, but I don't like hearing everything before. And like I say that, but also I did see a rumor on Twitter that Monica was behind Reality Von Tease, but I kind of just brushed it off because it seemed ridiculous to me. But I like that they kept it all under wraps until the finale. It was just like a treat for fans, because it wouldn't have had the same impact of us, like honestly kind of how the end of the Scandival episodes happened, because like we knew going before we were watching it, so good. Like, and I've been saying for a while now, I'm kind of over reunions, but this reunion, I cannot wait. I want answers. I really don't give a fuck about Heather's black eye anymore. I stopped, like, people are going to not like this opinion. I don't like Heather. I've never really gotten it. And it is because of how much, not all because of how much she sucked up to Jen, because I was on Whitney's side in their feud last year, but the constantly defending Jen thing was just insane to me. Even to the point now, like, okay, you're finally admitting it, but like, I don't know. I guess she was probably scared of like legal ramifications. Like, I can understand that because Jen was scary, but I want to hear about the black eye, and then I want to never think about Heather's black eye again, you know? And then I have to talk about Southern Charm because this whole season was so, so good. I have so many thoughts on the Austin and JT fight at the end of it. When JT pushed Austin and then they had their little kerfuffle, Austin was outside and he was like 10 years and we've never had this. And I was kind of, I don't know if like happy is the right word for how I felt when he said that, but there's something to be said about like they've had, and like, look, I'm not here really for like physical violence on my Bravo shows, although like the Monique and Candace Drag Me episode was like a must-see television event, but I don't think there's ever a need for the violence. And I think like Austin being upset about that in that moment, that all of a sudden like physical violence was brought onto the show, I commiserated with him on that. And I was kind of glad that he was pointing that out. It shows that it's something that they care about and maybe talk about behind the scenes. I'm not going to sit here and defend Austin, though. Like, he's an asshole. We all know what Austin is like. But JT was just doing way too much. I think he came onto the show knowing he would go after Austin. He obviously had a crush on Taylor. I don't think he's really in love with her. I think it was just all for for he was doing for the show and for a storyline. And that brings me to the Taylor and Olivia of it all. Like, I can't wait to watch them at the reunion. Team Olivia, like, it's not even a question. So that's everything I've been watching lately. And tonight I will be sitting down. Me and my mom are going out to dinner for her birthday. And then we're coming home to watch Gypsy Rose's new prison documentary, because I think like the whole world, I've been caught up in the Gypsy Rose media storm. I actually followed her case from when it started, when it hit the news, when she killed her, when her boyfriend killed her mom. And then I was like obsessed with the Hulu show, and at every single family event over the holiday season, we were talking about Gypsy. Fun fact, her and I have the same birthday. And I've been like watching her on social media all day, watching her press clips. So I'm excited to sit down and watch that show. And yes, that's everything I've been watching lately. Let me know if I'm missing any must-see shows. I did start The Buccaneers today. I watched one episode. I'm not really convinced yet. The acting is like a little not it for me. But I am planning my next long show is going to be Gossip Girl, which I have never rewatched. I watched it from the day it aired to when it ended, never went back. Gossip Girl, it changed my life. I always kind of knew growing up I wanted to live in New York City, but that show is what solidified it. And it was like my show, like from when I was in 8th grade. I was 13 when it came out. So I feel like I'm ready now. Something about turning 30 this year. I'm just like revisiting all of those things. I said this on a previous episode of the show, but I feel the most myself I've ever felt in my life. In like these last 6 months, I feel like I've really grown into that. And part of that now is me revisiting things like Gossip Girl. And tonight I'm going to start rereading Private, which is my favorite book series as a teenager. And I want to reread The Clique. And yeah, it's just like, I guess maybe it's just everything I went through last year, or maybe it is something about like getting older that I'm really enjoying. But speaking about things that I enjoy, it is time to talk about books. And this is, I'm going to say this and it might be wrong, but this is the first themed episode, and that is wrong because we had Christmas. So this is another themed episode. Today we are talking about books that were recommended to me. Whether it is on social media or in real life, I end up doing all of the book recommending, which is fine because it's kind of my job, aka professional book girl. But I love when the tables are turned and books are recommended to me. I think it makes me feel how I hopefully make you guys feel when someone says, hey, I read this book and I thought of you. There are a few Bookstagram recommenders that I trust explicitly. Not to say that obviously I get recommendations when I like scroll through my Bookstagram feed, but it's different when someone you know says like, hey, I read this book and thought of you, so you should read it. So I'm just going to shout out my two trusted Bookstagram recommenders are Haley's Bookshelf on Bookstagram. She's also like my favorite Swiftie bookish person, so go follow her. I'm not talking about a book she recommended to me on this episode, but I'm sure I will on a future episode. And when she has never led me astray, I've loved every single book she's recommended to me. And the other one is my friend Dotsie at For the Books, who recommends the best romance books to me. I will be talking about one of the books she recommended today. The first book, though, is one that I think it is the most recommended a book has ever come to me. I was getting messages from so many of my followers saying that I should read it when I was hanging out with book friends in real life. They were saying, hey, you should read this one. I think you would like it. And that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I'm going to do my best to explain this without spoiling, which is like the tagline for this show. This is You've Got Mail, but make it fantasy. And when I was sitting down to like write my little bullet points for this book, I don't know what the exact genre for this book is, but I would say this is historical fantasy. And when I first was recommended this book, no one like knew what era to set this in. Like I was told Victorian, but then I started reading it and there was like electricity. So I was like, what is going on here? And then I was at book club in December and this book came up and I mentioned that. And someone said that people were like, oh, it's World War I. And then I was like, yeah, duh. Like there's trenches and khaki and like typewriters. Like it's so World War I, you know? And someone said think of it as like a World War I fanfic. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's why I loved it so much. So it's like if You've Got Mail became a fantasy World War I fanfic. That is Divine Rivals. And that is why I loved it, because everything in that sentence signed me up. Speaking also, World War I is another historical period that just stresses me out because there's so much mud and like it just seems absolute torture. And like, oh, I feel so bad for everybody in World War I. Anyway, this is a duology. The second one just came out. I kept saying it would be my first read of 2024. It came out on December 26th, but I am setting this aside for, by the time you listen to this episode, I will have read it. But in my time, in wibbly wobbly timey wimey, that is a Doctor Who quote, I literally am planning what I'm doing tomorrow is reading this book. We're getting hit with a crazy rainstorm. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to sit down and read the second book in this series, which I am so excited about because I love this one so much. So what is this book about? Our main girl is Iris, and we meet her as she is working at a newspaper, and we know that this world that she lives in is at war. But this war is a war between the gods. So where Iris lives, it's not like straight, it's not fantasy even. Like it seems like it's like very much rooted in reality. And it's not like, I'm going to be talking about Sarah J. Maas a lot just because I'm like thick in the throes of like re-entering my Sarah J. Maas era. So it's very top of mind, her particular brand of fantasy. It's not like ACOTAR where like Feyre's village is like clearly like not this world, you know? Like there's no mentions of fae or and magic or anything like that as she's just like walking down the street. But there are two gods. There's a guy and a girl. And I think the guy is evil. Or maybe they're both evil. They're probably both evil. But basically, like years and years and years ago, a ton of shit went down between the gods. And then the whole thing is that they were like put to sleep or whatever. But they were woken up and now they're at war. And the woman god has this power. I think she has like an instrument or she sings, and it's basically like a siren call. And when maybe women, but I feel like it was mainly men who heard her song, were all of a sudden then like decided that they were going to sign up and they were going to fight for her in this war against the other god. So Iris's brother heard the song. And when the book opens up, she is saying goodbye to him at the train platform because he is now going off to fight in the war. And now she is the only one at home. Her and her brother were extremely close. He was older than her. He kind of looked out for her. Their mom has issues. I'm pretty sure she is an alcoholic and she is just not really a super present parent. And now it's up to Iris to kind of take care of the mom and take care of herself. And now her brother's at war and the gods are at war and etc. So she works at a paper and she is fighting for a promotion with this guy, Roman, who is like her rival. They use the word rival, aka the book is called Divine Rivals. That just came to me as I was saying it. So they're both fighting for this promotion, and it's kind of like Roman is from an aristocratic family. He's from money and he's a man. So they're just assuming that he's going to get the promotion. But Iris is a really great writer. Roman actually like you get his perspective as well. And he actually like likes Iris's writing, but for her, like he is such an enemy because she needs this job. It's all she wants. And she starts writing about the war and like things that aren't really being reported by her paper. And that's that whole plot line. But the magic of this world. So when she goes home at night, she sits down at her little typewriter and she starts writing letters to her brother, but she doesn't really intend on sending them. And it basically just becomes like she's writing her diary, but instead of saying dear diary, she's kind of writing them to her brother. And then she'll just like throw them in her closet because she's like, whatever, she's not going to send them to him. And then one day, somebody answers. All of a sudden, a piece of paper falls in her room, and it's in response to the letter that she had written. And they strike up this correspondence, and they become friends. And maybe they start developing feelings. And then at the same time, there's all this war stuff going on, and Iris goes on assignment, and she basically goes to the war where she goes to this town close to the front line. And this is kind of where everything changes for her. She meets people who are fighting the war. She's learning more about it. She's learning what the media and the government weren't reporting about the war. There's these creatures, and this is where the magic starts coming in. And like if they hear this bell, they have to be inside because these creatures are like prowling in the night and will just kill them. And all of this stuff starts happening. And then obviously Roman is still in it, and it's a fun little romance between the two of them. And I really can't say anything else, but I will say the fantasy aspect in book one is not really there that much. Like, you know about the gods enough to know that they're at war, right? But like, you don't really get into crazy specifics about that world, but it is set up for the second one to be more about that. And maybe at the beginning of every episode, I'll give a little update from the previous one. So maybe next week I'll update you after I read the second. But I really love this book. I thought it was really fun. I loved Iris. I thought it was such an interesting premise. I loved the idea of them, like, of these magically linked typewriters. I thought that was so unique and so much fun. And I loved where it ended. There was one thing that was like so obvious to me, but I don't know. I'm just a genius. I guess I figured it out. But it's because it had just happened in another fantasy book that I read. And this happens a lot. This is why sometimes it's specifically with thrillers. I can't read a bunch of thrillers in a row, because when you start to figure out, like, you'll see a common trope. Like, for example, there's two thrillers, and I'm not going to say the names of them, but the first one I read, it was like the brother did it. And I was like, oh my God, like mind blown, insane. And then like a year later, I was like, wait, I wonder if it's the brother that did it. And I never would have thought that if I hadn't read it in the other thriller. And so it's like you see these common tropes within genres, which is so normal. It happens in every single genre. But because I read so much, I just like pick up on it more. So that's why I figured that thing out. But and I'm also a genius, but beyond that point. I'm excited for book two. I'm excited to see where it goes. I really, really enjoyed this. I was so hesitant and unsure, and I probably would not have picked it up if so many people hadn't said to me, hey, I read this and I thought of you. So thank you to everybody who did say that. I gave this 4 stars. I loved it. That is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Next up is You with a View by Jessica Joyce. And this was recommended to me by my friend Dottie. Her Bookstagram handle is For the Books. We were at the Ripped Bodice in Brooklyn, which is such a beautiful bookstore. And she recommends the best romance books to me. And so I was like, pick out a book for me. And she handed me this book. And oh my God, I loved it. So our main girl is Noelle, and she is in her late 20s, and her life is kind of a mess. She is unemployed. And I feel like I keep picking up books where women are unemployed or having career issues. And I'm like, were they always out there, or am I just picking them up right now because it reflects my current situation? But anyway, she had to move back home with her parents. Her life is kind of just like not on the track that it would be. She's feeling a bit lost. She was extremely close with her grandmother, who passed away. And now that she's home and has a lot of time on her hands, she starts going through her grandmother's things, and she finds these photos of her grandmother with another man, and it's when she was young, like when she was in college, and she never thought that her grandma had dated anyone else. Her and her grandfather had a like wonderful love story. It's kind of, the family always compares everyone's relationships to that relationship. It's like the gold standard in their family. So she's kind of shocked to see that her grandma once was even with somebody else, and she makes a TikTok about it and is kind of just like, does anyone know who this guy is? Whatever. The TikTok goes crazy viral to the point where one day an anonymous user comments and says, "That's my grandfather." So they decide to meet up. And when she gets there, she sees her high school enemy. This guy, I'm pretty sure his name was Theo or Teddy, or they called him both. I think they called him both. And it turns out that it is his grandfather that the grandma had the relationship with. And now Theo is kind of his life is on the exact opposite track of Noelle's. They weren't like mean to each other, I guess, but they both were like, they fought each other for class valedictorian, and I think they were both voted like most likely to succeed. And like I said, her life is not on the path that she imagined it would be right now, but he just made Forbes 30 under 30. He funded this very successful travel company. To her, it seems like his life is like hitting like all the milestones that she imagined she would be hitting. Like she mentions that like stalking him on LinkedIn, and like that becomes a whole thing because he saw her stalking him on LinkedIn, which I thought was like really funny. But so now they're like suddenly forced back into each other's lives, and the grandfather is like so kind to Noelle, and he was like, "I really love your grandmother," and he starts telling her their story. But she also through that learns so much about her grandmother's life that she never imagined, and she finds out that they ended up breaking up because her family, the grandma's family, never approved of him. But before that, they were going to elope, and they plan on going on this honeymoon road trip. So Noelle is like, I have all this free time. She misses her grandma desperately. And she used to be a photographer like as a hobby, but she gave it up. And the grandfather, is a photographer. So they bond over that. So she decides she is going to go on her grandma's honeymoon road trip. Like the grandma was the one that planned and mapped out the whole thing. And she lies to her parents and says that it's like this photography trip that she's going on with this photography group, but she plans on going alone. When she goes to ask the grandfather for permission, he was like, yes, but I'm going with you. And by that meaning Theo is also going. So now the three of them are on this, not really cross country. It kind of takes place like all out west. In America, they're on like this, I don't know, it was like hiking and not a road trip I would go on. Oregon Trail, remember? But they go on this trip together, and as they're on the trip, every day he reads another letter that her grandmother had written to him, and she is just finding out so much about her grandmother's life that she never imagined, like really really getting to picture her as a young woman because she's like hearing her words. She's feeling so close with her. It's like their relationship was like really sweet to learn about, but at the same time Noelle and Theo really come together, and Theo's also going through some stuff, and like I was obsessed with their romance. There's so many like different interesting aspects to it. Like this book is full of so much heart, and it is so sentimental, and I was tearing up at times. I don't have any living grandparents, so it was like kind of emotional for me to read about that. And actually when I was reading this, I read it on my way home for Thanksgiving, and I got home and I just like opened up a drawer, and right on top was like one of the last birthday cards my grandma had sent me. So it just felt like a little like sign from her as I was reading this, because it was just like so sweet, the grandparent aspect, but then the romance on top of it. I was obsessed with Theo. I love Noelle as a character too, and like I loved them together. I loved all the things that they went through together. It was just so much fun. I don't even know what romance I would compare this to, because the grandparent aspect was such a huge part of it, but also like they're finding themselves, and she's now on this new life path she never imagined, and it seemed very real. And maybe just because it mirrored my life a little bit, like I could really relate to that. But I just like, it's like I wrote in my note, Noelle was finding herself while she was also finding her grandmother, and I just thought it was like so sweet. I gave it 4 stars. Really, really loved that. That is You with a View by Jessica Joyce. The final book is completely different, and it is The September House by Carissa Orlando. And this book was a Bookstagram made me do it. So all of a sudden in August, I started seeing this book everywhere, but I kind of just, and by everywhere, I mean like every time I opened Bookstagram, but I didn't think it would be for me because I always say I don't read horror books, which is just, I don't think that's really true anymore because I love this. And like Black Sheep, which was one of my favorite, I think it was my number 8 favorite book of 2023, was a horror. I think it's when I think of horror, I think of like slasher and like Jason and Scream. And like that's not my brand of horror. This felt more like a spooky thriller. So I guess like my brand of horror is spooky thrillers, and that is what this book did. So the main girl is Margaret, and her husband Hal, like it kind of, I think they like always lived in apartments, and she always dreamed of owning like this very big house. And one day they find on the market their dream house. It's this gorgeous Victorian mansion. It's in their budget, which they just like cannot imagine how they're able to afford this house, and they buy it. And everything is normal at first, but slowly, like little things start happening. And then in September, the house literally starts bleeding. Like blood pouring down from the seams in the walls. The house is bleeding. This like screaming starts coming, and it gets louder and louder as the month goes on. And there are always a few ghosts in the house. Specifically, there is this housekeeper who like literally acts as their housekeeper. And then there's this child that's always there who is a bit more like, he's not evil and he's not sinister, but like he'll bite. But through the month of September, more and more ghosts start visiting. So obviously she was like, what the heck is going on? But she loves this house so much and she didn't want to leave it. So instead she learns how to deal with it. And she does a lot of research into the past history of the house. And I don't want to say anything for spoilers, but she learns about the previous owners. She starts through learning the history of the house, learns who the ghosts are. She will like go to the church and like have an exorcism done every month just to kind of keep the more sinister spirits at bay. And her husband really just kind of learned to live with the house. And like the house is very much a character in this book. This is really like this book is like the Haunted Mansion. Like this, it's about a haunted house really. But she just loved it so much, and she kind of grew to love the ghosts and the spirits, and she gets used to everything, and it's just like so normal for her, even though when the book starts it's like in September and she can't sleep because the screaming is so loud. And you know that they're like, don't open the basement door because something will get out. So it's like hinted that something like really evil lives in the basement and is kind of behind all of this, right? So as the book opens though, Hal is missing, and she like Margaret kind of doesn't really care. Like he started becoming more fed up with the house than she was, and he started voicing like moving and being over it, and she just like didn't want to hear any of that. And he is a writer, and so he would like work upstairs in his room, and he just like wasn't happy, and like she's been missing, he doesn't really care. They have a daughter named Catherine, and she is like, where is dad? And she comes home to help her mom figure out where the dad went, except she decides to come home in September when everything is like going crazy. And the house is always like haunted, but it's the month of September that everything is out of control, the bleeding, the screaming, like a million ghosts hanging out, you know? So then from there, it kind of becomes a mystery, like where is Hal? Well, also as it goes on, you're learning more and more about the house and the people who lived there in the past and their untimely demises, etc. And Margaret is really trying to keep her daughter from finding out about the haunting. So she tells the housekeeper ghost to like not help her, but the daughter will notice like the stove, you left the stove on or something, but really it was like the ghost was like making them tea, like things like that. So I really can't say more because of spoilers, but the way everything comes together, it was fun and it was clever and it was unlike anything I've ever read, and I couldn't put it down. It didn't scare me. I am a very vivid dreamer, so when I read like anything I read really. It kind of, if it stays in my subconscious, like it'll infiltrate my dreams. But this didn't give me nightmares. I also, though, don't, everyone's gauge for those things are different. So I don't know if it would, something like would affect you in that way, but I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. Bookstagram made me read it. That is The September House by Carissa Orlando. It's time for some mood reads. Our first mood read is for Haley, who I mentioned earlier in this episode, Haley's Bookshelf. She is in the mood for something wholesome, but not romance. And the first book that came into my head was The Doll People by Anne Martin and Laura Godwin. I'm rereading One Childhood Favorite a Year. I just reread this. I was obsessed with it when I was younger. And I think it's because I was obsessed with my American Girl dolls. And I would just always be like, I wonder if they like come alive at night, like the doll people do. I really enjoyed the reread. It was so sweet. It was so wholesome. It held up. It was just like reminding me of the magic of childhood. And like, I just loved it so much. So that is what I recommend for Haley. Jordan asks for spooky winter vibes. And for that, I would say The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This is what I was getting at with like spooky thrillers. This is probably the first, it's really probably a horror book, but this is the first spooky thriller that I read. It is about a haunted all-girls boarding school up in New England, and I didn't think about what it was about before I started this episode, and now I'm remembering from the top of my head. There's a cold case involved, there's ghosts, it's spooky, it's winter, it's cold. I loved that book. And finally, Krista asks for a multi-generational family saga, and for that, I would say The Most Fun We've Ever Had by Claire Lombardo. I loved this book so much. It's one of the first books that I read when I moved into my apartment that I still live in 4 years ago. And I just couldn't put it down. It is so great. And we haven't had anything new from her since, but she is releasing a book in 2024 and I cannot wait for that. A while ago, this was supposed to be being made into a show and nothing ever came of it, but I feel like this would be a really great limited series. You get 3 generations of family. It is about relationships between parents and child, siblings, like I love reading about like a fucked up crazy family, and this one fits the bill. I loved that so much. And that is our show. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, please make sure you are following, subscribe to whatever you have to do on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Follow me on Instagram at @careadwhat. Follow the show at Professional Book Girl. Check out the bookshops.org page and read the January book club pick tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Submit your little voice memos to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com by January 25th. We have the book club episode coming out on February 1st. Thank you so much for being here. And next week's episode is listener's choice. So this is your chance to request the books that I talk about and the opening topic. So submit what you want to hear me talk about in the beginning of the show and any books you want me to cover. Either DM me on Instagram or email at professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com. And you may just hear what you requested on next week's episode. Have a great week. I will see you then.